Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rumcast. This is the podcast that talks all things rum-related with the people who love and shape it. We have another great interview episode lined up for you today with Robyn Smith, the founder of Rum et al., which is the new hotness out there in Southern California, and we get to talk with her extra geeky about all that. But, Will, before we do that, let's introduce ourselves. My name is John Gullah, and here with me, as ever, is our co-host, the et to my all, Will Hookinga. Will, how goes things there in the neighborhood of the Grand Ole Opry?
It's good up here. I'm still processing you using the phrase "new hotness" 2 out of the last 3 episode intros.
No way! Did I really?
Yeah, in the Alambique Serrano epised, you used that then too. So is this the new John Gullah Fantastic?
Game.
Is that what it is?
I hadn't thought I would use the new hotness ever.
That's why I'm so surprised.
2 times in 3 episodes is very surprising to me.
I thought you were doing it. I thought you were doing it to be funny the first time, and now this time I'm just wondering if it's your new catchphrase.
Well, maybe I did do it to be funny both times, but just forgot. But Southern California is hot, Will, and that's where I was going. And sorry, but yeah, I guess I used it more than once.
All right. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just, I'm sure the listeners at home, someone else noted it. I just want you to know that I'm right there with you.
You're just mad because I didn't realize you called the last episode Liquidation, and I didn't catch on that until later. That's what it is.
Yeah, we had some good brainstorms for alternate titles in the Rumcast Patreon Discord, and John loved the idea of using liquidation to describe the episode when a patron suggested it. But when I did during the episode, I got the blank face emoji reaction, nothing, not a smile, nothing out of this man.
Yeah,
but
just
you
the
know
way
what, John?
You brought it just wasn't the same as,
We're moving past all that. As you said, we've got a great episode to get to, and we've got a few fun things to discuss, I think, before we get to the episode. One thing that I wanted to talk about first, I know we want to share some results from our cold or chilled rum versus room temperature rum experiment that we conducted with our patrons on a Rumcast happy hour. But before that, in our Alambique Serrano episode, which I mentioned just a few minutes ago, I think anyone who listened to that episode will remember that one of the rums that you and I were both enthralled with was the Pico Canoa Alambique Serrano, the one blend from the new Vida Nativa series that is quickly earning a notorious reputation for its watermelon candy notes, very distinctive notes of watermelon Jolly Rancher, and all things of that nature. Some people love it. Some people think it's way too much and almost tastes fake. As we know, though, this is a brand that doesn't indulge in additives, so I think we can confidently say, there's no funny business going on. But one of the questions that I posited as we were tasting that in that episode was, this is such a distinct, fun flavor that you don't often encounter in spirits, especially in rum. I wonder how it would play in cocktails. And, obviously this is a rum that is priced around $85 to $100, so pretty expensive for a cocktail. But, I'm not above throwing an expensive rum in a cocktail every once in a while, especially if it's something like this. And so I decided to put it to the test and had some really amazing results. So there were 2 cocktails that I tried. I had these in mind from the beginning, both actually with your favorite Campari in them. So the first cocktail was the classic Jungle Bird cocktail, which is kind of fitting because Pico Canoa literally is a jungle bird. I think it's like, I think it's a type of toucan if I'm remembering correctly, but it's bright and colorful and it's right there on the label. So I was like, this has jungle bird written all over it. And also I think this not aggressive, but just like very distinct watermelon flavor, I think it needs something bold to counterbalance it, right? And that's where the idea of Campari came in. I also thought pineapple would be a nice complement, and pineapple juice, there's a lot of that in the Jungle Bird cocktail. So I made one. It works pretty similar to the classic recipe, which the one that I use is 2 ounces of pineapple juice, half an ounce of lime juice, half an ounce of simple, 3/4 ounce Campari, and then usually I believe it's 1.5 ounces of rum, but this is a 57% ABV rum. So I wanted to adjust accordingly, just slightly. I didn't want I didn't want the balance to be off. So I toned it down just a little bit to 1.25 ounces. And let me tell you, it was undeniable. The watermelon notes held their own. It definitely came through in the cocktail. and it tasted like a jungle bird with a watermelon spin on it, which it was absolutely delicious. And so after that, my next question was, will this rum Negroni? Will it work in a Negroni? You know,
Yeah.
one of the best Negroni variations is the Kingston Negroni, which calls for an ounce of Jamaican rum, usually a funky Jamaican rum. I think the original person who kind of, you know, made the recipe well known used Smith and Cross specifically, which is also 57% ABV. And, you know, it's still equal parts, 1 ounce, 1 ounce, 1 ounce with Campari and sweet vermouth. And so I tossed it in there, didn't change the recipe at all, makes a phenomenal Negroni. And, you know, there's the ratio of Campari to the Pico Canoa is, you know, it's more balanced in favor of the Campari. They're on equal footing. And so I found the watermelon like didn't come through as much, but still came through a lot, just not as much in the Jungle Bird. Very complex, very delicious. So if you manage to snag a bottle of Pico Canoa, I would recommend trying those, as long as you're a Campari fan, of course. Although the Jungle Bird, even to people who don't like Campari, is usually a cocktail that they will enjoy. Negroni's not so much, as you can probably vouch for.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to throw those ideas out there. And also, if you've been experimenting with this rum at home, I'd love to hear what you've found that works well, because, you know, I'm not going to be too precious about using this rum in drinks. It just works so well.
My initial reaction is I would think that the Campari would really take away from some of those uniqueness features of it, because you need such a strong rum to hold up to it.
Yeah.
But what you're telling me is, no, that's not the case. You're still getting what you feel is the essence of the rum out of it, and a good drink.
Yeah, I will say, like, it simplifies the rum a little bit, because the clearest thing that comes through is the watermelon note. One of the things that I like about the rum itself is that I thought it obviously that note is very strong in the rum, but to me it was very layered and complex with other flavors coming through as well. And I will say, in the Jungle Bird, I pretty much only taste the watermelon. In the Negroni, I also tasted some of that kind of like what's
Piney?
the word I'm looking there's almost like this dusty,
Cucumber?
earthy quality that I get from a lot of Alambique rums, and I got hints of that in the Negroni as well, which I thought played really well. So you get the watermelon, you get some earthiness. It was great.
All right. Well, hey, I mean, I'm willing to try. I've warmed up to a couple of things with some less Campari, more Aperol, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm on my way to more of an appreciation for Campari drinks, but I'm still not there yet.
I like to call Campari the thinking man's Aperol.
Oh, well, keep thinking.
Anyway, yeah, send us your ideas, host@rumcast.com. Let us know on social media if you found Pico Canoa to work well in any drinks, or if you think it's blasphemy to be using it in cocktails in the first place. I'm sure some people hold that opinion, but anyway, John.
It's the thinking man's, because you have to really think hard about, do you really want to do this or not?
You have to think really hard in order to talk yourself into liking it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
That's why it's the thinking man's. Okay, what do we want to share from our chilled versus room temp rum experiment? As a reminder, this was something came out of our Liverpool trip, in which we tasted mini rums in 40-degree temperatures, which we then tasted at room temperature the next day. And these were cask strength rums, but we just wanted to do like an A/B test next to each other. Chilled rum, room temp rum, and we wanted to select a rum that would be widely available so people could join us in this experiment. And we selected El Dorado 12 after soliciting feedback from listeners. So we did this during a happy hour. What were your takeaways from the experiment?
Yeah, and just as a lead here, we understand, and we knew going in, that most likely what we were all going to find was what we felt like going in, is that a chilled version of a rum it's going to be a little bit more stiff. It's going to be harder to pick out some nosing notes, or if anything, muted is a good word. So the question really that we were trying to explore was how much, right?
Yeah.
What is the length of the effect on this? And we tried to do this with not only our opinions, but other people's, and get their feedback. So I felt like, and Will, I'll give you some room to talk too, but I felt like the range of people's opinions on this ranged from, it was awful. Like, I would never drink at this temperature because they could not get anything. Some people said it absolutely killed the entire experience for El Dorado 12. Like, they would never drink that way. They couldn't get anything on the nose. They couldn't get much on the palate, and it was muted to the point of not being able to enjoy it. Other people, and I think I almost include myself in those, was I got a little bit of a different note on the palate. I felt like the highs of the experience stuck out a little bit more than the mids or the lows when it was chilled versus when it was room temperature. So there was slight difference to me. I still enjoyed it, but at the end of the day, just to be clear, I still think I want it neat room temperature. So what about you?
Oh, I was on more the opposite camp from you, which was this basically totally ruined the experience for me. And to me, it brought out a really dominant bitterness in the rum, which I was not expecting that to happen at all. And I'm not saying that's the universal experience people had across the board, but I found all the things that I found enjoyable about El Dorado 12 at room temperature. I was searching desperately to find them in the chilled version and just not getting, like, you still get some of those rich caramelly type notes that you get from El Dorado at room temperature. But for me, all like the more complex notes, the fruitiness, things like that were just completely muted. And again, there was this like lingering bitterness that was just not good.
I think the point of it is, though, we chose that rum because it was widely available and all these people could try it with us. But it's not necessarily the case that I think I'm saying drinking it chilled is going to make every rum the same exact thing as El Dorado 12. There may be some where you can have a slightly different experience on what you're able to pick out of a rum by adjusting the temperature. And I also, even with the El Dorado 12, heated it up a little bit, which I know wasn't part of our exercise, the core of it, but I just wanted to see what would happen. And I do feel like when you heat it up, you get a little bit more of the lows. So I get a little bit more of the caramel and chocolatey and some of the fruity out of heating it up. I don't want to drink it that way. But I'm just saying, I think that there's some sort of scalar thing there with temperature that the colder it is, the more the highs stick out, and the warmer it is, the more the lows stick out. So I would be interested to see, is there a rum out there that is improved by drinking it slightly chilled?
I will say, I was the reverse of you as well, in that to me, when it was chilled, I got all the low stuff. So the more chocolatey caramel type stuff, I didn't get any of the highs. So I don't know, like, how we're so different. I guess it's just difference in palates maybe, but yeah, it was different in my experience. So I'm trying to remember, wasn't there a particular note that was really strong on the chilled rum that someone pointed out on the happy hour, and then everyone was like, oh, it was peanut. That's what it was.
Yes,
there was a peanut note on there, which it kind of came out of left field on the chilled note, and it was one that a lot of people who were attending picked up on. So that wasn't just like one person's palate. A lot of us tasted it.
Well, and there was, interestingly, there was also that peanut note is a specific type of congener that goes along, and I can't remember the name of it right now, that one of our listeners pointed out in an email to us recently. Said, like, hey, here's this whole like tasting notes version of what this kind of congener, or I don't know, molecule is not the right word, but something tastes like when you experience it. And I don't know that that's necessarily the same exact thing for everybody, but I do think it was interesting to see that came up in the same time. So for whatever reason, in this case, what you're saying is, and what others were saying, was that peanutty, dusty kind of almost like peanut shell note came out of it when it was chilled. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah, we got that email from Jonah, which was really cool to see. I think it was a sensory attribute list that he uses with a beer tasting group. So that was really interesting to see that. I'm trying to find where peanut is on this one. So it's sulfitic. It says SO2. And it says match vitamin bottle, bouillon, peanuts, burnt toast. So perhaps that associated congeners with that came out. But yeah, I thought that was pretty amazing.
There's also circus peanuts. I don't know what the difference is on the top one. Isoamyl acetate.
Oh yeah, well, circus peanuts are like it's like candy. It's not an actual peanut. Okay. You know, like the.
You can tell
it's
how
like
many times I've been to the circus.
They don't sell them. You can buy them in the store, John. You don't know what circus peanuts
No,
are?
I've never had a circus peanut in my life.
Okay, hold on. I have to show you these because I know you've seen these at some point. You can't have grown up in America and not seen these at some point. Hold on. I'm going to share my screen. these orange looking candy peanuts.
No
You've never
idea.
seen these.
Oh, okay. I think maybe trying to remember. I've never had them, but I
They
at least may have seen them.
they're gross. They taste kind of like banana candy, sort
Oh,
of. They don't taste like peanuts at all. So that's why I think they're in that category with like
okay.
banana runts. But
I was
okay.
gonna say because those two things don't sound like they go together. But
Yeah.
all right.
Well, that
Well,
was a fun tangent, and we're always learning here on the Rumcast. In some cases, it's learning about circus peanuts, but we do have a great interview with Robyn Smith to get through from Rum et al. And Rum et al, for those who aren't familiar, it's, as you said, John, it's a new distillery based in Los Angeles, and I think it would qualify as a micro distillery. But I think what's so interesting about Robyn and what she's doing and why we wanted to talk to her was, in addition to the distillery, she has run a blog and YouTube channel for several years now called This Blog's Neat. And along the way, she has been breaking down her entire process. Like, you could probably watch her YouTube channel, and if you have the equipment, you could make her rum. Now, obviously, it wouldn't be exactly the same because it's really hard to duplicate all the conditions. But she's breaking it down in super detail. She's a chemical engineer by training. She has a PhD, so she really knows her stuff when it comes to that. And
yeah.
she's breaking down like all the congeners. She's getting the gas chromatography done on her rums, so she can tell you how many esters and congeners and everything is on there, and you get the breakdown. But it's super fascinating. I'm curious what has stood out to you about what she's doing, and what made you want to talk to her.
So I think it's a combination of things. We follow the rum community pretty closely as part of it, and you keep seeing certain things pop up certain places with people that have a good nose for rum
Yeah.
and good rum. And so that's part of it, is you see a little bit of that building within the community. I think another few pieces of it is just how different she positions herself and her rum, both for what she's doing with it, the idea that she's come up with to create, which we talk a lot about the baseline, and then how she does different variables on that. And then just the branding of it even is really just sticks out there. And her being a one woman operation really spoke to me in terms of like, oh, this is something very different. And there's a lot of, micro rum distilleries out there who are doing different things, but she seems to have something that's really, I don't know, for lack of a better word right now, cool and eye-catching. So
Yeah.
that was where I wanted to, kind of talk to her with
A
that.
certain je ne sais quoi, you could say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just to briefly touch on, because we do go into it in deep detail, but just if you're listening and like, okay, well, what's so different about what she's doing? Her approach is she is releasing rums in batches, right? And so she's established like a baseline rum. This is her standard rum recipe. And then subsequent releases she's done have all been taking that baseline rum and tweaking one variable in it. So her second release was called Dunder Clap. So that was taking the baseline rum and tweaking the ratios, incorporating dunder into the wash. And distilling it that way. Her third one was called Tailspin, which that was incorporating dunder and tails, and the distillation was slightly different as well. So it's basically, if you taste them side by side, it's like you can taste the baseline, and then you can taste the baseline with tweaks, basically.
Right.
Like, and so you can see,
And all
okay,
the information of how
exactly.
it got there. Yeah.
Exactly. So we break all that stuff down. We talk about our thoughts on the rums and what we taste in them and everything. But it was really fun. She was great to talk to, and I'm really looking forward to like what she's gonna do. And we talk about her future plans in there. But anything else to add before we kick it over to the interview?
No, let's run to the break and get to it.
All right, we are here with Robyn Smith, the founder, sole distiller, do-it-all person, scientist behind Rum et al., which is a very exciting distillery out of Southern California. You may have also seen her excellent videos on YouTube via her channel, This Blog's Neat. Robyn, really excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
I did have one kind of funny question after, I've been watching your videos for a little while now, and one thing that stood out to me is, do you know the exact number of FedEx uniforms that have been ruined by spilled molasses that was supposed to arrive at your distillery?
Oh my gosh, no. But it's two. It's happened twice, right? Two 5-gallon buckets have not made it, and like, these. So I order my molasses in 5-gallon buckets because
Yeah.
we don't have a molasses pump or anything like that. So I am just brute force pouring them into the tote. Uh, and Yep, it's happened twice now where all of a sudden one just mysteriously doesn't show up with the rest. And it's not FedEx's fault. Like they're 60-pound buckets, right? They're
Hmm.
5-gallon buckets of molasses. And it's just the bucket in a box. There's no like
No
No
padding or any,
padding.
protection. Yeah.
no. So like sometimes they show up and I rip open the box and there's just like little bits of molasses that's just seeped out. And I'm like, okay.
Uh,
So to not make it,
It had to be really bad.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you guys have ever cleaned up molasses spills before.
I haven't. No.
I know that it's
Yeah.
slow,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
It is. It's slow, but it gets everywhere and it just
Mm.
everything becomes really sticky and yeah, it's quite a mess. So I apologize to FedEx, but yeah, it's happened, confirmed twice, but I have not heard the extent of
Oh wow.
their trucks, their like where it broke, when it broke. Yeah.
There's probably someone listening to this right now who like received a package coated in molasses and now they're gonna connect the dots. Um, okay, I want to talk about. We're gonna talk about Rum et al, the distillery, your rums, which we've been able to try and have really been enjoying. I want to talk a little bit about your background because I'm just interested to know more because it's kind of a unique path it seems like you've had. So I know you're a chemical engineer by training, and then I think the first distilled spirits thing you did professionally. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was at Lost Spirits where it sounded like you were kind of doing like R&D type stuff, and now you're doing Rum et al. Can you kind of connect the dots on like how you went from chemical engineer to sort of distillery R&D crazy experimental stuff and all that? How did that happen?
I'll do my best to connect the dots. Yeah, so I have a PhD in chemical engineering, and I have always loved. So bourbon was my
Mm.
first love. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. Did you
Mm-hmm.
guys start when you started loving rum? Were you like it was rum first?
No,
Yeah.
bourbon for
It
me
was
Oh,
also.
bourbon first. Okay.
Yeah, rum was first for me. Although like the first kind of nice bottles of spirits I ever had were bourbon, but
Hmm.
it didn't really take for me in distilled spirits as like this super amazing thing until rum. But John's right there with you.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Bourbon was the first, right? That was my first love. And so being that I was a scientist, I just naturally nerded out about how it's made.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
how tweaking the mash bill and the warehouse conditions, barrel entry proof, how this all like impacts the flavor profile, right? And so I would nerd out about this and yeah, I mean, I loved spirits, and then Lost Spirits. I was out in California, out here, still out here in
Yeah.
California, finishing up my dissertation, writing that, and I saw that Lost Spirits was hiring an engineer, and I was like, I'm an engineer. They use rapid maturation, so my engineering degree is all reactor chemistry, so I
Mm.
was like, this translates really well. I get to like merge my two
Hmm.
my two lives, right?
Like Oppenheimer. Yeah.
Exactly like Oppenheimer.
And not too far away there in Las Vegas. Yeah.
True, true. Um, so I interviewed with them, and again, I was still like, "Oh, I'm a bourbon drinker." I bragged about having a 13 bottle bourbon collection. I thought I
Oh.
was like, but because of the people I was around, like none of my friends had that. So I was like, I've got quite the collection.
It takes up one cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. And while I was on my interview, this was, mind you, after I had gone through the tour. And I don't know, have you guys tried anything from Lost Spirits back in the day?
I had one, I think it was their Navy style rum, and I got
Hmm.
a bottle of it. It was probably like 2018 or something like
Okay.
that. So it was a while ago.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't. I was
So,
a year too late. I just went to Las Vegas recently, and of course
oh
that was too
no.
late. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
sad.
yeah.
Okay.
I know someone who has samples uh,
Ooh.
that can share. But they start you off with the Navy rum, which is 62% ABV. And then, everything else was upper 40s to mid 50s. And so after the tour, went and continued my interview with Brian Davis, who is the founder. And he pours me a glass of, it was 1980 something, a 33-year-old diamond
Mm.
distillery
Mm.
rum. And he just wanted to test my palate. And I was like, oh no, I'm a bourbon fan. I don't like rum because of what I had in the
Mm-hmm.
past, right? We all come
Mm-hmm.
across some rums that are not that delightful in college. And so I thought that's what rums were, that they were super sweet. But he pours me this glass of rum, and my mind was just blown. I was like, wait, I didn't know rum could taste like this.
Is that, you said he
Um,
did it to test your palate? Is that the test just if you like it, or is it like break this down what you're tasting? Like what is
I think he wanted to know what I was picking up, which is hysterical
okay.
because he could have done that with something much cheaper, much younger.
Yeah.
Let me pull out
And
this incredibly rare thing to throw at you. Yeah.
right.
Mm.
And that was it. That kind of was the catalyst that set me on my love affair with rum. And I was like, wait, I have been judging this category completely differently. And so all the things that I obsessed about with bourbon, right? All these variables that you can tweak are nothing compared to what you can do with rum, right?
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
there's so many more variables that I shouldn't say so many more variables, but you can tweak versus bourbon, right? There's much more constraints with bourbon.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that's where it started. And yeah, I was at Lost Spirits until COVID, through COVID a little bit, just working in production. But they had shut down their location out here in LA and just opened up in Vegas. And I was not moving to Vegas.
Fair.
I was hoping to stay here. And yeah, during COVID is when I kind of took all of the R&D that I was doing there and brought
Mm-hmm.
it home. I also was giving tours every single weekend, like Friday through Sunday. We were giving tours, and I needed a way to channel all of that energy. And so I started my YouTube channel, which I don't know if you guys have really dug back into those early videos. I don't. They're
You
like,
don't go back and watch your earliest videos, really?
no,
Well,
no,
now
I
I'm gonna
don't.
have to.
You could. They are mostly whiskey. I tried to sprinkle in some rums in there, but like mostly whiskey tastings. And it was just like set up the phone, record, and immediately upload. Zero edits, no, yeah. So I don't really go back and watch those videos all that much. But that was my way of like, okay, let's start to like share this with other people. And I started hosting bi-weekly virtual blind tastings,
Mm.
Oh,
which was
fun.
again like more, yeah, just like outreach to consumers, like, hey, I get to talk to you about this like nerdy stuff and you get to get drunk at home, like.
Mm-hmm.
um and yeah, kind of kept that up, kept the YouTube channel up. And a little over a year ago, Aaron, who is the owner of Dead of Night Distillery, reached out to me just with some questions about how to make rum. He primarily makes botanical spirits, like his gins are wonderful. I really, really enjoy his aquavit. He also makes some liqueurs and is coming out with an Amaro line. I don't know if that's
Mm.
public knowledge or not, but if the,
Mm.
if the rum world is interested,
We have some
yeah, he's
Amaro fans out
Oh,
there
we
for
do.
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
Me among
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, look out for those. They're
Okay.
really tasty. He's been doing R&D for a while. But anyways, he just had questions about making rum, and I went to the distillery and was chit-chatting with him, and he could just kind of tell how passionate I was about rum making. And just like, I don't know, the industry as a whole, and how I feel like rum is a little bit underrepresented. You know, the stigma of like, oh, rum's super sweet, or I don't like the coconut flavor and all
the
that
PR
stuff.
problem.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think he saw that, and he just gave me the opportunity to essentially act as like a squatter in his distillery. Like, hey, do you want to work on this and make this here? So that's how Rum It All started. I didn't seek to start a rum brand because I thought, you know, it would either involve me having to front a whole lot of money to start my own distillery, or I would have to, again, front a whole lot of money to contract distill and have someone else do it for me. And that, you know, I like getting messy. I like cleaning up the molasses. Yeah. So I wanted to do that work, and he was gracious enough to give me that opportunity. So
I mean, once he brought that up to you, was it an instant like, yeah, of course I want to do this? Or like, 'cause I mean, because there's one thing to go and be like, oh, you know, create some cool, interesting rum, but then there's all the other things you have to do on top of it, you know, to like create the brand and like sell it to people and all that stuff. Or were you just game for it right away, or like how did that work?
Good question. I definitely went home and thought about it. I think I was like originally like taken aback, because I was like, wait, you would let me do that?
Yeah.
Really?
Like, have you seen molasses when it's spilled?
Yeah, I'm like, there's nothing fermenting in here. Are you sure you want to add that into the distillery? I was like, you want to let me keep dunder as well? Like, are we sure? Yeah, and so like, I think I went home, thought about it, and was like, this is an amazing opportunity. And one thing that we have in California, which now I think craft distillers in New York are able to do, it's like a permanent thing that changed, is during COVID, we were able to ship bottles directly to consumer.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and that's like a really big deal, right? You can sell online and ship directly to the consumer. Like that's a huge benefit. Yeah, and New York, I think, has it now, which is really cool. But that was just like a COVID thing. It was just a COVID relief. And they kept extending it one more year. And so last year, Aaron was like, I think this is the last year we're going to have it. I think 2025, they're going to take it away. So we kind of, once I was like, hey, this actually sounds like a really cool opportunity that I would like to take advantage of. We were like, okay, we got to get moving quickly because it's already May. And if January 1st, 2025, we're no longer able to ship direct to consumer, then kind of your business model is going to change. They extended it one more year. So 2025, we're still able to do it. However, I do think that they're going to eventually take it away.
Why do they have to take it away? You know, we're having such a good time being able to order
everybody's
spirits.
Happy.
Yeah, exactly. Except the distributors.
Yeah, I think it's the distributors, and I think it's also supposedly some out-of-state distilleries are upset about it, because it's only if you're a California distillery can you ship in state. So but I think by the time this gets posted, I will have direct to consumer shipping taken off the website, actually. So,
oh, bummer.
Yeah, we're you guys are catching me kind of in a transition period, which is cool.
Okay, yeah, no, we will dig into the transition for sure.
Yeah. But before we get to that, actually, I do want to talk a little bit more about how all of this is coming together. And I will say that I saw a recent video of you in time lapse where you were labeling, shrink wrapping, packing up something like 100 bottles, and seeing that and your other videos that you post online. And it really makes me think of all of the stuff that you have to do with this to make this thing fly, and how daunting that is for a one-person operation. So I wanted to give you some time to talk about what is it like running this one-woman operation, and what are some of the pros and cons of doing everything on your own like that?
I mean, we'll start with the like one pro is that you don't have to answer to anyone, right? Well, I suppose you're answering to the consumer. Yeah, but there's no boss to answer to. uh, at times, yeah, very daunting. And I do kind of live on that fence of like, oh my God, this is a terrible idea. What am I doing? I should just quit everything right now. To like, no, you could do it. Like, keep pushing ahead.
And then you realize, wait, I could do this experiment. And then you're like, yes, go in.
Yeah.
2 a.m. Get ready, get dressed, go into the distillery and get it done. No, I don't know. That's just what I imagine happens.
There's no waking up at 2 a.m. to. There's a lot of sitting in traffic, but there's no waking up at 2 a.m. But honestly, like, yes, it is technically a one woman operation, but I have so much support. Like, we'll start with Aaron at dead of night. Like, the fact that he's letting me do this makes it already feel like I'm not alone. And he's a one-man operation too. So I think having a little bit of company at his distillery is nice on bottling days, right? You're not just sitting there like bottling by yourself, listening to music or whatever it is. But I also have like other support. Mary Dempsey from Lost Spirits. She's one of my really good friends. She was the distiller there. She comes to the distillery and helps me bottle. So like if your labels are crooked, it was bottled by me. If your labels are like meticulously placed, they were bottled by Mary.
But that's the genius behind your design here, because they're like amorphous blobs. So like, it's perfect. Right. If it's a little this way or that way, who knows?
I'm telling you, Mary knows.
Mary's like, redo that one.
She's like, oh my God, it's a little crooked. And I'm like, I don't think so. Unless it's totally sideways, I think it's straight, like totally fine. So yeah, I feel like I have a really great support system. And I was telling you guys, my partner, Jerry, this is his desk that he works at every day. So if I'm home and I am tasting through new distillate, and I'm trying to decide on cuts or something, the amount of times that I come upstairs and I'm just like, are you on a call or not? And I'm like, can you smell this? Can you taste this? So I feel like I have a really, really great support system. So even though it is technically a one woman operation, I don't feel all that alone.
Well, I want to talk about the rum itself. So you're presented with this opportunity to be able to make rum in the distillery. How do you start going about deciding what kind of rum you're going to make? Because anyone who's kind of followed your story through this blog's learned about the rum, like you have a very sort of distinct premise for what you're doing, which is having this baseline rum and then introducing variables one at a time with various releases. And that seems like a really clear vision. Was that from day one where you just like, I've always wanted to do a distillery like this, and this is how I'm going to do it? Like, how do you start, and then how do you go about developing what the baseline is going to be in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. This has been something that has been an idea for years. Like, even when I was at Lost Spirits, the amount of times that I just wanted to pour some of my experiments for guests that were, really, really interested. I would often do it for the tour guides.
Oh, nice.
I was known as like the girl that would walk around with sample vials in her fanny pack. Like they're labeled, so only I know what they are. And I would just be like, what do you smell? What do you taste?
It's the best thing. The best
sample belt.
The best thing to be handed from a fanny pack is an unmarked rum sample.
After a while, the tour guides started like seeking me out, and they were like, "Do you have anything? Anything in the fanny pack that we can try?"
Yeah.
There was no drinking on the job. Don't worry, guys.
Of course not. Yeah.
Right.
Never.
That never would happen at a distillery.
Never. So it's always been just like being able to allow consumers to be able to experienced directly what I love about spirits, of like, you tweak this variable and here's how the flavor profile changes. And of course there's batch variations and everything like that, but like, yeah, being able to share that with a consumer was always something I was, yeah, from day one, day zero, you know, something that I wanted to do. But I always thought it would be through video format of like, I guess I just have to describe my tasting notes to them.
Yeah. When you go about starting, like you know the vision, I feel like there's so many different directions you can take when making rum. And that's I'm always fascinated when someone's, you know, coming up with the first rum they're gonna kind of base everything around and release to people. How much of it is sort of determined by constraints of what you're working with, and then like how much do you let sort of this do you have like an idealized type of rum you've always wanted to like how does that come together?
Oh, good question. Um, so there are definitely constraints, right? I
Yeah.
live in Southern California, and apparently there are some farms that grow a little bit of sugar cane, but it is nothing near the quantity that you would need to even ferment a batch of rum.
Yeah.
So that kind of eliminates any fresh
Mm-hmm.
pressed sugarcane juice for now, at least. You know, I'm hoping
Mm-hmm.
that future Robyn will have the opportunity to do that. Um, so there's a little bit of constraints there. I looked into cane syrup as well, and Steen's cane syrup in particular. They're based out of Louisiana,
Yeah, I've
and
seen Steens before.
yeah, uh, but extremely expensive to ship to
Mm.
California. So I went with like honestly readily available molasses, baking grade molasses. I am also very picky about my molasses.
No
I
sulfur.
know,
I've learned from your videos you don't want sulfur.
Non-sulfur. That's right.
well, you know, if you ever try to ferment some molasses and it doesn't ferment, you'll learn that way.
It's the sulfur. Can you
It's
smell that sulfur also?
um maybe a little bit.
Okay.
Honestly, I've never ordered sulfured
Well, that would
molasses
true. Good point.
because I'm
Yeah.
like,
You were
I'm no,
wise and you were
I
like,
know
ha,
better. I know
I will
better.
not
Yeah.
fall for that.
Yeah, I'm not going to
Yeah.
waste my money here. Um, so I knew it was going to be a molasses rum constrained by the still at Dead of Night Distillery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which actually I shouldn't say constrained, because that has it is completely customizable. Like, you're able to put plates inside the neck of the still.
Hmm.
There's also a deflegmator or deflumeter. I always say deflegmator, but it's essentially like a condenser on top
Yeah.
of the still that increases reflux. So there are ways of like customizing the still, and I went with just a straight pot still. And you could go down a whole long rabbit hole of what yeast strains to use.
Yeah.
But I was like, for a baseline rum, I feel like I should make a rum that is that essentially anyone could make, right? Anyone can order the molasses. You can
Hmm.
order it in 1 gallon jugs. You can order it in 5 gallon jugs. You can order it in giant totes. I went with distiller's yeast from Red Star. You get that off of Amazon. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then the
Nice.
pot still is just, I think, a simple pot still, and that's it. And just wanted to show what kind of rum was capable of being made using very simple ingredients
Hmm.
without overcomplicating it. I think at some point, someone in the US decided to spread this recipe around. And I don't know if it started with the home distillers, if it started of using crystallized sugar, baking grade molasses, or not baking grade molasses, blackstrap molasses,
Mm-hmm.
and it's saying
So
like this
many
makes
craft
a really,
distilleries, so many craft distilleries use that kind of recipe. Yeah.
yeah, and you know, it doesn't make the greatest tasting rum, and you don't need to complicate it that much. You don't need to have multiple ingredients, right? I
Mm,
realize that maybe sugar and blackstrap molasses is cheaper than baking grade molasses,
Maybe.
but
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
bacon grade molasses definitely tastes a lot better, in my opinion, and is a lot easier to ferment.
This is off topic, but I feel like kind of that's how some cuisine is. Like some Italian cuisine, it's all about simplicity of ingredients, but somehow we add things to it and make these weird decisions that result in something different and often not as good. So it's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you guys have baseline in front of you. Would you agree that, like, does it seem like a good baseline rum? I don't know.
It is aptly named, I would say. And when you were describing sort of what you were going after just now, I was thinking this description is going to sound negative. I don't mean it that way, but it's almost like giving yourself a blank canvas sort of for all these, to introduce these layer these variables on top of, right? So it's not something that like is like, oh, well, there's, wild and crazy stuff going on here. But like a very like straightforward, solid presentation of like a versatile rum that you could do a lot of different things with is how it struck me initially. So I was like, feels very baseline appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I really like about it is for an unaged product, it really does a good job at the finish is pulled out in length for me. So it's not just giving you that kind of hit in the front and then it's gone. And I do get that in some unaged rums sometimes, especially those that are attempting to be baseline, like with a mixing drink or a cocktail type of thing that you could do. But this one really does give a nice experience that pulls out the flavor over time, and that's through either, because I know we haven't talked about this yet, but you do have two different strengths available. And,
I do.
So the baseline is the 49% ABV that you have, and then there is a still strength as well. But both of them bring that experience for me.
Yeah. I wanted to. Honestly, I feel like I made the rum for me, right? This is like what I would want to see in a rum brand, which is why this is what I've gone with. And I really like getting to see like, okay, what does it taste directly off the still, like straight off the still? What does it taste like? And so I wanted to also share that with people, but realizing that not everyone is going to want something that's 75% ABV.
Yeah.
We do. We do, though.
Another wise decision. We do. Yes.
And these are very small batches. Like how many bottles of still strength baseline came out of the first batch?
35.
30. And those are 375s.
Half bottles. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I think it was 58 full-size bottles at 49%, something like that.
So you're saying these are super ultra collector items?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So you passed along to us both the first batch and is it the first batch and the second? I know it's two different batches. Is it number 1 and number 2?
I labeled them as 1.25 and 1.24. So
okay.
Get out of here with your 1 and your 2, Will.
Gosh. Non-scientist over here.
I was hopeful that I would get more batches out in 2024 baseline. Right. So I was like, 1.24. So I can have a 2.24 and so on. So yeah, 1.25 is the first batch of 2025 of baseline.
Did you aim for batch 1.25 to be exactly the same as batch 1.24? And do you notice any differences in them? And if so, were they intentional?
The differences were not intentional. I will say I have talked to my Patreon members in thorough detail about what could possibly be the differences here. But there are subtle differences. I say they both, well, you guys tell me, do you think that they smell and taste different from one another? Like significantly different, slightly different?
I do think the noses are pretty distinctly different to me. What do you think, John?
I need more time, but so far I think they're fairly close, I would say.
I think it's definitely noticeable that they are related,
Yeah.
and supposed to be the same rums. And if you compare them to my variable rums, then yeah, they're definitely more similar than the
Right.
variable rums.
Right.
But there are definitely some differences. I think that 1.25 has some more like pronounced fruitiness
That's what
on it.
it's fruitier and juicier kind of to
Mm-hmm.
me on the nose.
Yeah, and that could come from a number of things that happened that were just unintentional when making the batch. Again, these are small batches, and for instance, so when I start the fermentations, I add the molasses and some warm water directly from the tap into the tote.
Hmm.
Mm.
And for some reason, the hot water in the building has been non-existent. So batch one, for example, the starting temperature for my first batch of baseline was like 102 degrees Fahrenheit. And for the second batch was like 72 degrees Fahrenheit. So like a
Big difference.
significant
Yeah.
difference in at least the starting temperature. And so one of the things that I thought is like, okay, maybe that lower temperature could have drawn out the lag phase a little bit more in the beginning, right, where the yeast are starting
Yeah.
to wake up,
Mm-hmm.
and that could have potentially allowed for some more bacteria to get introduced into the ferment, just from ambient bacteria, which could cause an increase in ethyl acetate production and possibly some other esters, some other acids, something like that. Or just like the cold temperature, yeah, stressed out the yeast a little bit. Usually warmer fermentation temperatures in general are usually responsible for increased ethyl acetate. But I think
Mm.
that starting temperature being lower has something to do with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
Another thing was that I normally add nutrients on the second day of fermentation. I like to wait till the yeast get woken up and are hungry, and then I'll give them a little bit of a nutrient boost.
Like little babies.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I think I had to substitute teach for like that entire week and
Oh,
wasn't able
wow.
to get in until day 5 to give them their full dose of
Ah.
nutrients, which
Okay.
is still like not even a full dose of nutrients. I think it's a half dose of what is recommended.
If I'd had a substitute teacher growing up who like had a batch of rum going while
You
she
can't
was
say that. You
substituting,
can't.
I know. I'm just
You
saying
can't be
that's
like,
like
students,
I
listen.
know. Like I'm just
I
saying
gotta
that's
go
like
get to my rum.
that would be the most badass substitute teacher. Is what I'm trying to
You
say.
would be
Yeah.
badass though. That's
Yeah.
true.
My kids do not know that I make
Understandably, yeah.
the teachers do, the other teachers do, but the students do not know. So I added a little bit of the nutrients on the first day and then added the remainder on the 5th day. So is that delay of nutrients also going to stress the yeast out a little bit? So
Lag
they
it.
express specific genes that end up adding to this fruitier flavor profile. Yeah, those are like two of the big things that I'm like, it's probably those in combination, right, with
Yeah.
everything.
These
And
are
so,
called
yeah.
shadow variables, by the way. The unknown,
I
underlying
like that shadow variable.
shadow
Oh my gosh,
variables.
right? The
You can use
shadow
that for free.
variables.
Um,
Thank you. Thank you. I
um,
kept everything as consistent as I could, everything. But
yeah.
there's so much outside of my control. Like I don't control for fermentation temperature. There's no jacket around the tote or anything like that. I am the one who's stirring the fermentation. So is there a difference in the amount of oxygen that's introduced? Like,
Right. Yeah,
the
you can only
shadow
do so
variables.
much. Shadow
Yeah.
variables. That's right.
Mhm.
Will scooped my question here, but I'm still going to ask it because I want to start leading us into the idea of variables, the known variables, right? The
Yes.
actual variables that you have released. And so,
Yes.
as Will was saying, your idea and the kind of premise is you've got your baseline, which we talked about, and now you're releasing these variables, which let's do some algebra here. We're trying to isolate a variable, right? And so that, I presume, means you're having to be incredibly methodical about your process in order to do that, to avoid some of what we just talked about, right?
Mhm.
So how do you do that and isolate that variable so that you can create this product. And obviously, I know we just talked about all the uncontrollables there, but I assume there's controllables.
Well, there are some controllables, right? There's definitely going to be lots of shadow variables. But I came out with the first variable batch. All I did was just displaced some of the water with some dunder, which is I mean, I'm assuming everyone who's listening to this podcast has heard the word dunder before.
Yeah, but give the explanation for those who may be wondering.
Actually, I will.
Okay.
Especially because a lot of people will get dunder and muck confused and kind of use the terms interchangeably.
Yes. They're thinking that you've like dug a pit in this distillery that is lending you their space, and they're like, "Wow, that's
Southern
crazy."
California.
Yeah.
The pit was already there. Yeah. I didn't do any digging, guys. So when I refer to dunder, I mean the liquid that's left over in the still after your first distillation, which is the fermentation has been stripped of essentially all of the alcohol, a lot of the volatiles. What's left are like the unfermentable sugars, some nutrients for the yeast, some dead yeast cells, definitely, etc. And adding that to a fermentation essentially recycles some flavors that maybe didn't make it out of the still the first time, but mostly it just kind of like acidifies your wash. This is done in not only the rum industry, but also in bourbon, right? We have backset that's tossed into,
backset.
Right? Like a sour mash. Yeah, so that was my first variable. And you brought up the molasses buckets, some of them breaking at FedEx. So when I had started this batch, I had in my brain, I was like, I'm going to do 30% dunder. 30% dunder because I know from experience that 40% is too much and stalls my fermentation. 20% is like,
why even
I want
bother?
I want a little bit more flavor, right? I want a little bit more flavor. So I was like, 30% is going to be great. And so I started the fermentation with that in mind. However, I had received all but one of my buckets. And I was like, it said it's going to get delivered today. I don't know why it got, mixed up and didn't get delivered with the rest of the batch, but I'm just going to start the fermentation anyways. So I started with adding the proper amount of dunder for that batch.
Right.
Added the molasses and the water. And I'm like, man, FedEx is normally here by now. I check the tracking and it's like big exclamation point, like not making it, not coming here, getting returned to sender. And so it's accidentally 33% dunder in the fermentation. But I think it's a happy accident because it didn't stall the fermentation at all. Like there weren't any issues that I had encountered with 40% dunder in the fermentation. So yeah, extra dunder in the ferment. Yeah. So that's the first variable batch, which I call dunder clap.
Good
I like
name.
puns.
Good name.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Puns. And then for the second batch of variable, since I had kind of played around with the fermentation conditions, I wanted to play around a little bit with the distillation. And again, I still wanted to show what you could do using just a pot still. I don't have access to a double retort pot still, but I wanted to kind of show ways that you might be able to maybe mimic having a double retort pot still. So instead of being double distilled like all my other batches, this was triple distilled and had tails and dunder added into the second and third distillation runs.
Hence tailspin.
And it's called tailspin because every time I explain it, it sends people's brains into a tailspin. It's like way too complicated to explain.
No, I think people really appreciated that explanation. I mean, it's It's fast. Like when you explain the concept to people of introducing these variables, I think it's a very straightforward, easily understandable concept, right? It's like, oh, you have a recipe and you tweak it. But what's so interesting about spirits is there's so many points at which you can tweak variables, right? There's the fermentation, there's the actual base material, which you're tweaking by using dunder and tails, and so then there's distillation and the style, the way you do that. So there's tons of different threads you can pull on. So it's really fascinating to get to taste them. And I tasted all of these last night, and now I've just poured some of the still strength Dunderclap and the still strength Tailspin. I'd love to know, because I wanted to block out tasting notes until I tried it and everything, because I try to avoid the power of suggestion, not because I'm like precious about like, oh, I have to determine what it tastes like, but it's, it's just anyway. I'd love to know, if people are tasting these at home on their own, what should they look for? How do you think those variables express themselves differently in each of these rums?
Well, I would like to know what you guys taste.
Well, you have to go first, though.
But here, I hate telling people what they should be looking for, because everyone tasting is so subjective, and sometimes I have these very, very, very hyper specific to me and my experience tasting notes. For instance, John, you live in South Florida, and I grew up in South Florida, and yeah, and so I was the kid that was always running around collecting bugs and lizards, and And
I'm pretty sure we're like separated at birth, Robyn, because that's like your whole origin story was my origin story. And like now I know you're from South Florida, and now you played with bugs as a kid. I don't have a PhD. No, I'm saying the way she came from bourbon into, that like really reminded me of me. So like all these things that you're saying, I'm like, yes, did we play together as kids, or like what happened?
It's entirely possible. I was the weirdo that was collecting bugs. And so are you familiar with like the millipedes in?
Of course.
Okay,
yes.
And the smell, right?
Yes.
Millipedes have a smell?
Millipedes
I
do,
thought they were bad
enough.
enough. I didn't know they had a smell.
They're these little ones, though. They're these really little millipedes, and they have a very distinctive musky smell.
Mm-hmm.
Disgusting.
When I tasted the Grand Arome from Holmes Key, there we go. There, I'm pointing to it. I immediately was like, "Oh, this is the millipedes."
Millipede musk. That was.
Millipedes.
I think they used that on the bottle. Actually, I was kind of like, I don't know if people are going to like this.
It was a note
musk.
on there.
Yeah.
If you look carefully, you see all the little legs on the sides of the bottle. That's what that is.
I think Eric campaigned really hard to have that included on the final label draft.
But anyways, that long story just to emphasize my point of like, I have hyper specific tasting notes sometimes, and I that's why I like to hear what other people get too. So
yeah.
I'm more of a roly-poly person myself, really. With it. No.
I used to play with roly-polies as kids. I feel like I never see them now. What happened to the roly-poly population?
My God.
They're still here.
Okay.
They are, but like, Robyn, when was the last time you come to South Florida? Because
over a year and a half ago.
Okay, so not too long ago. Maybe you saw it. But here's the thing. I've lived here my whole life, and the I don't know what you call this, the insects, the lizards, and the fauna have changed over time here in South Florida. It's super weird.
I think insect populations are declining worldwide, I think.
Well, but they've also just changed. There's different things here now. There's some that are the same, but there's different things here. You used to have lightning bugs. Do you remember lightning bugs?
I love lightning bugs. We still have lightning bugs.
We don't anymore. It's
interesting.
Oh, no.
I didn't know that Floridians, especially South Floridians, called them lightning bugs.
Well, we also call them click bugs sometimes, because we'd hold them in their hand and they like click like this.
Interesting.
Like this is back when I was like 8. Also like Robyn. I haven't done that in a while. But the lizards that are here now are completely different And
Lots
it's
of
all
curly tails.
yes,
No longer a
yes.
Knowles. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're 100% on point. That's exactly what it is.
Crazy.
And it's crazy because there's actually a sound that these curly-tailed lizards make that my wife was so good at figuring out what this sound was because for about 6 months, we had a sound nearby our house that would do this like click, 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 click thing at night. And we're like, what in the heck is going on? Like, do we have like a bats living in our attic or like what is up with this? And it turns out she made the connection. She was like, well, we've never heard this growing up because she was also born and raised here. And she figured out, oh, it's these new lizards. And she played the sound online. Yep, that's exactly what it is. So it's just weird that there's these things. And I assume that this is probably happening in other parts of the country as well, where these things change over time. But now that we've gone sufficiently into entomology and herpetology, I think those are the right ones, we can come back to rum.
Yeah, I did have. I had pet lizards as a kid, so I was a lizard kid. Yeah, we used to collect toads and things like that. Anyway.
There's our common bond.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll describe a little bit of the differences that I pick up on.
Great.
To establish this as a safe space for tasting notes.
And I will help you bear this burden.
So thank you. I'll try to keep it broad. To me, the biggest difference going from baseline to dunderclap, there was a step up in fruity associated tasting notes. And for me, yeah, for sure, nose and palate. For me, with dunderclap, I guess it's interesting how expectations play a role in this because I hear dunder and everyone associates dunder with Jamaican rum, right? And so I start expecting like tropical fruit, funkiness, things like that. And I wouldn't describe this as a funky rum. It has fruitiness, but it's not like if you're expecting, huge rum funk, that kind of thing. It's not that. And the fruit that I get is more kind of like less tropical and more kind of like pear type fruits.
Yeah.
Again, that's just me. And then when I go to tailspin, I think it gets a little more fruitier, and I feel like it's more citrusy kind of fruit, so a little more in the tropical direction. So like that's the progression that I experienced, but I'm curious how the changes express themselves to both of y'all.
There's still also, and this is a good call by you and probably the power of suggestion as we've talked about, that like kind of chocolatey note that I get on all of them that has a common kind of thread between them.
Robyn, cool. before you hopped on, we were just discussing baseline, and I said that it gave me this like chocolatey note to it. And trying it again once we started, I got like it was like blueberries and chocolate. I have no idea if that like overlaps with how you tasted it all, but yeah, that was me.
The other thing I'll contribute is at first for me I wasn't picking up a whole lot of sweetness, but it goes to show that you need to sip something over time to really gather a little bit more. It's almost like a telescope. You need to like train it at an object for a long time before you pick up the amount of light to get an accurate picture. That's kind of what the tasting experience is. And the longer I taste this, the more and more I'm getting interesting notes and interesting things. And it's really like it's making my palate salivate, which is really always a good sign, So that's a kind of a cool thing. You can't judge things on one sip, especially when they're, we're trying to point out some smaller variations here. I think I could taste these in a blind test and tell you which ones the variables were. I feel pretty decent, confident I could do that versus baseline.
I agree.
But they're not worlds apart either, right?
It's funny that you guys bring that up because, again, I'm going to be pouring my rum at the Rum Curious Summit. And I have some of these, like the little wee Glencairns. I haven't put them up on my website or anything. And I was like, I think I'm going to have for the first, I don't know. I don't know how many glasses I have, but for the first 20 people who are able to correctly blind taste my three rums and identify which one's which, you get a free little wee Glencairn.
Just for people who are watching this on YouTube, this is the wee Glencairn next to the standard one. You can see how cute it is. Yep. And it has the little Rum et al. Script logo on it as well. So they're great. I would try to correctly identify rums to win one of these.
Yeah. They're pretty cool.
Well, if you guys are going to be there, you might get another glass.
All right. Well, let's talk about the future. So we talked a lot about your
Yes.
current releases. We talked a lot about what you have out there now, both in the still strength versions, which is really cool to see, and then also the baseline. Sorry, the base. Now, what would I call that? Still strength and regular strength versions.
I call it proofed down version
Proofed down versions. Got it.
because it is, right? It's proofed down. So
Okay. What can you tell us about some of the future variables and variations that you're hoping to explore?
yeah, good question. So I think for me, it kind of feels like this chapter using just molasses, baking grade molasses, and distiller's yeast and a pot still doesn't feel quite finished yet. I feel like it
Mm,
could round out with a few more fun things to throw in. So one of those being, I mean, I know I already have like decently long fermentation times, but doing an extremely long fermentation time, I think would be a fun one to play around with and test. Also, adding cane vinegar to the fermentation, in addition to dunder. Maybe
How
there will
would
be
you
some muck.
how would you make cane vinegar where you are now?
Steens has some raw
mm.
cane vinegar.
Oh wow,
I
really?
would just, yeah, again, readily available ingredients, guys.
I
Like,
did not know that.
yeah, they do. They have a raw cane vinegar. So I think those would be two really fun, potentially really fun variables, that would kind of round this out. And then from there, right, it's like playing around with yeast strain, wild fermentation. Those are definitely in the future, and like a little muck pit action would also be a
Nice.
really fun. Yeah,
Just
She won't
just
be
like
digging the pit, but there will be a muck pit.
yeah,
wait,
yeah, yeah. No,
wait. So I know you store your dunder in like a tote, right?
mhm.
So would you take a similar approach for a muck pit, or are you actually like,
Yeah.
getting in the parking lot or the field behind the distillery and starting to dig?
So, so I'm not going to dig behind the distillery.
Okay.
The so Dead of Night Distillery is in a part of the Arts District. Have you guys been to downtown LA?
I've
No.
passed through, but it's been years.
I was gonna say it's been over
Yeah.
20 years for me. Yeah.
What part of downtown LA did you drive through? Like the high-rise buildings and stuff, or did you like go through Skid Row?
I don't,
I went to where Jamie Foxx lived.
so
So I think that's Beverly
not
Hills.
Skid Row.
So yeah, the distillery is in an industrial part of the arts district
Okay.
that is like Skid Row adjacent and
Mm.
Okay.
also like very, very industrial. It's not a wonderful location to say the least. I've had a couple of people, like, you can ask Arminder what he thought about
Okay.
visiting the distillery. I've had a couple of people where I'm like, come check out the distillery, but you like go into the distillery and lock the door, you know. Um,
There's
so I
angry
will.
FedEx
So there
drivers
will be
coming
no
who
muck pit
are covered in
outside.
molasses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you imagine what would end up in the muck pit outside?
Oh my
So that's
god.
not going to be a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely could, and I don't want to skew in that flavor
You don't want those
profile.
variables. Yeah.
Those are not
No,
even good shadow variables.
Wait,
Not at all.
speaking of which, I know you're dealing in these small batches,
mhm.
and when you put the resources in to make something, like I, it kind of needs to work, right? Have you tried anything to this point where it's like this variable did not work out, and or do you like test very tiny batches before you
Mhm.
scale it up?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, these
Okay.
have all been done at home. Actually, no, I will say Tailspin was a little bit of, I shouldn't say a shot in the dark, um, because like just going off of the flavors of the cuts that got tossed into the still, like I was like more than happy to harness those flavors. Same with like, I really like how my dunder smells, so I was
Mm-hmm.
more than happy to like toss that into the still as well. So as far as that goes, that wasn't something that I tried previously at home. But yeah, everything else, like if there's any question of like a will this work out, or I'm just gonna dump it, do that at home. Yeah.
Okay.
But to answer your question, no, I haven't had any variables at the distillery scale that have been a no. Yeah.
All right. I have a slightly embarrassing question here to ask you, but I feel like you were the right person for it. So
Okay.
I have seen, as we mentioned, you do a lot of education through your blog, and it's amazing, and you do a good job of educating. So I have a question. Can you explain to me, like I'm 5, what is the difference between a congener and an ester?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Congener is yeah. Of course, like you're 5. You're not 5. It's I feel like
He acts like he's 5.
but
Sometimes.
I think it's so funny because there's a lot of people in the industry who definitely throw out terms and kind of talk about them because they've heard them in
Yeah.
context, but wouldn't be able to actually define them. Yeah, totally. So we have ethanol and water that makes up
Mm-hmm.
99% of all
Mm-hmm.
spirits, right? It's just ethanol and water. Congeners are everything else that's not ethanol and water. So this is
Okay.
congeners are the
The
umbrella.
umbrella. Okay. Got
hmm
it.
Esters are a very specific type of chemical compound, and they're known for being fruity and floral. That's
Gotcha.
it.
So
Yeah,
all esters are congeners, but not all congeners are esters.
correct. And we tend to focus, yeah.
Ah,
You got it.
yes. All
John
right.
John gets his honorary PhD
Yes,
today.
give me my gold star, please. Thank you.
But we tend to focus on only specific congeners, right? We tend to focus on esters. And there's a lot more to rums than
Hmm.
just the esters. So,
On the note of congeners and esters, you have something that I don't know if I've seen a breakdown this thorough on other producer websites before. You have a section that's labeled everything you could ever want to know about this batch, which I really like how literal that is.
yeah.
But in that, you have a congener breakdown, and it includes every congener and ester in the rum that I guess you were able to measure. If someone is having one of your rums at home and they pull up this section on your website, which I would encourage them to because it's really interesting, how do you interpret that? Like, how do you look at, okay, there's ethyl acetate, there's ethyl butyrate at like 0.006% or whatever. Like, how do you look at that and then taste the rum? And do you search for each of those things? Can you find each of those things in the rum? How should people use those?
I I think people should just use those and treat them as data and not use them to approach the rum.
Okay.
Um, because again, so there I send these samples out to white labs. I wish I had a GC so I could do the chemical analysis myself. If
Oh.
anyone out there that's a Rumcast listener wants to give me $25,000, we can make that happen.
Or donate an old chromatographer. Is that the right word? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chromatic graph.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I send them to White Labs, and White Labs only looks at and measures 10 analytes. These are the compounds that they have, decided these are the ones we're going to focus on.
Yeah.
And that's what's listed. And so when you look at them and you compare them to the other batches, which I posted a video a week ago, a couple weeks ago, where I actually talked about the breakdown of these congeners and compared them from all 4 batches that I have,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of discussed that. It doesn't necessarily represent how it's going to taste. For example, the total congener concentration based on what was measured from White Labs is the highest for both baseline batches versus both variable batches.
Right, I saw that, and I loved that happened, and then I loved being able to taste them and be like, well, to me, Dunderclap and Tailspin are the fruitier rums, but they have, if you're just going off like the uh, grams per hectoliter of absolute alcohol, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that acronym is, that's
You got it. Yeah.
on the nerdy rum bottles. I think a lot of times people use that as a guide for like, okay, these are going to be progressively funkier. Because if you like taste the Hampton 8 marks, which you have right behind your head there, they do get progressively funkier as you go along for the most part. But that's not always the case in rum. Like you can't just go off of whatever has the highest number is going to be the fruitiest or the funkiest or whatever. And to me, that really expresses itself in these rums, where the ones that have the lower congener count by that measurement actually taste a lot fruitier to me.
So have you done a tasting of TECC and DOK side by side?
I don't know if I've done them side by side. I've definitely had them separately before. I don't think I've done the side by side though.
And like, correct me if your experience is different, but for me, DOK is by far more funky than TECC, but the ester concentration is the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So like that's two completely different distilleries, but it's like, okay, there's more going on than just the ester concentration or the congener concentration, because these compounds are also going to play differently in your olfactory system when they're together, right? If you're tasting them in isolation, sure, but when you're tasting them together, all of a sudden that combo now transforms from like one specific type of fruit now to like a completely different fruit, just because those concentrations are shifted.
Yeah, the esters tell you part of the story, but not the whole story, right? It's
correct. Yeah.
So it's interesting to see. Yeah, it's like you're looking at the back of a book and reading the little blurb there. You know, your ester counts. You know, it's kind of telling you something, but you need to read the whole book if you really want. That was a terrible analogy, but you know, I went with it.
I admired that you kept going.
I tried to make it work. Robyn, I wanted to ask you about your branding a little bit. I think it's really cool looking. It's different. It's fresh, kind of modern. I don't think of anything out there that I know that really looks like it. And that's part of the mission with branding. As Will and I have been going through our own kind of experiment with branding right now for our single cast project. It's really hard, and there's a lot to think about. So I wanted to ask you, how did you arrive at those labels and the look, and how long did it take you to get to a place where you were happy with it?
I love the graph paper on the back,
really cool.
by the way.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's like, I have my lab notebook right here. So it's like, that's
you were
like
inspired. Yeah.
Yeah. So the back is inspired by my lab notebook, and I wanted to provide as much information as I could on the back, that at least like if I knew if I were to go to a liquor store and pick up a bottle and saw that information, I would be like, this is coming home with me.
Cool.
Like it has all the information that I want to know. There's no questions of like, you know, what else did they use to make this? Was there crystallized sugar? I don't know. Again, like the crystallized sugar in American rum, kind of negative connotation there. And then the front label is actually a microscopic image of the fermentation. So those are all the little yeast cells. You can see some little bacteria in there, and that's just me playing around on Adobe Illustrator and changing around the colors. As you guys can probably tell, I do like bright colors. So again, I feel like I made the branding something that I wanted to see, right? It has this really nerdy aspect to it, but still feels, to me at least, fun and a little feminine. And that's what I was kind of going for with those, with the branding. So how long did it take? Like not that long. Again, it's a one-woman show here, so I'm just like, I like it. I think it looks good. My sister is in PR and marketing, and so I sent her like a picture of the front label, and she was like, I don't know, it kind of looks like fungus. I was like,
that's what I'm
fungus.
Going for.
Perfect.
I thought amoeba in a way, but like it's clearly better than that.
Yeah.
There's no single amoeba.
I want to kind of close it out by, I know you talked a little bit about other variables that you'd like to try out, but kind of looking at what you're doing, it feels to me sort of like this is phase one of rum at all. So if it is phase one, have you formulated what phase two, phase three, phase 10 look like? Are you moving into your own dedicated space? Is the product evolving? Like, how much of this are you really planning down the line versus kind of letting happen organically?
Yeah, there's a little bit of both. So we are phase two is happening, I guess. As I mentioned, we are in a transition period now. So
Right.
I am actually transitioning out of Dead of Night Distillery and into my own space.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's funny because when I went and talked with Aaron in the beginning, when he just had all these questions about how to make rum, he was like, "You're so passionate about it. Would you ever want to start your own rum distillery?" And I was like, "No." I see what, craft distillers have to go
Hmm.
through, the grind, and it's so hard and so cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
Um, but then, I don't know, I started rum at all and I was like, I can't stop.
I can
Like
do
I have
this.
I have
Yeah.
to keep going.
Yeah.
And
You've got
so
inertia at this point. You got to
right,
keep
right.
going. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that's a bit of a part of it too, is like if you're starting a craft distillery and you don't really have anything to show for it for the first 2 years, because like for instance, Aaron had his space for 2 years before he was actually able to start distilling. And
Mm.
yeah, it's a lot that goes into it. I don't know how much you guys have looked into like getting liquor licenses or like wholesalers licenses or anything. No.
We've
Yeah,
looked
it's
into acquiring as few licenses as possible.
yeah, right. I mean, that's like the smart move, is to just not acquire any licenses, right?
Yeah.
How can I do this without having to get a license? Because it is just at every single level, right? Federal to state to
Mm.
city. There's so many hoops to jump through, and a lot of craft distillers start because they are super passionate about making rum or whiskey. There's a lot of whiskey craft distillers in the US, and then they just get way behind. It's hard to compete with other brands. It is uh, yeah, just so hard to justify spending that much money on equipment and
Hmm.
rent and waiting for your licenses and
Yeah.
everything. So it's really challenging. And so I was like, no way. Like I see what you craft distillers have to go through in order to start your distillery. But we have a little bit of momentum, and the fact that I do have bottles that I'm able to showcase and kind of say like, hey, rum industry, I'm here and this
Yeah.
is what I'm capable of making, feels like a little bit less of a risk to start my own distillery. I say that now, and then it's going to be like, you know the grind for the next five
Yeah.
years. But yeah, so I am currently looking for my own space right now so that I can scale up a little bit. It's still going to be small boutique style. And hopefully, I would like to have like baseline as the kind of consistent rum that's always available, and
Yeah.
then the variable batches being those like every once in a while we get a new variable that's introduced into the mix. And I really want to be able to bring people into the distillery for tours and
Yeah.
tastings, because I think making those connections is where like the consumer learns just a little bit more and learns that appreciation just a little bit more.
So I never experienced one of the Lost Spirits tours in
Mm-hmm.
person, but I read about them. Is
Yeah.
that the kind of tour that you're envisioning?
I do not want anyone to come into my distillery and think like, oh yeah, this reminds me of Lost Spirits, because that would just be like copying them, and they're so unique, right? So the tours were the amount of times that we had people come through and I'm like showing them my lab and showing them the production floor, the amount of times that like at the end of my portion of the tour they were like, so where do you guys actually make the stuff? And I'm like, like, did you not did were your eyes closed when we were in
Uh-huh.
the production
Uh-huh.
floor? um and yeah, so they just kind of there's a lot of theatrics. And I feel like that wouldn't be very true to me, but I would still like that kind of whimsical aspect.
Have you thought at all about an aging program? You're like, oh my
John,
God.
I've never gotten asked this question before. Everyone's like, huh, so when are you going to age some?
Yeah.
It's so hard because I don't want to discount all the good work you're doing with this product unaged and all the work that's gone into just getting here, right? So it's a terrible question to ask, but it's also almost, I don't want to say necessary, but it's a logical question. Yeah.
It's the question everyone who's listening has. And I may have some in a little barrel right now. And I say little barrel. This is much more niche to the home distiller community. Are you guys familiar with Bad Motivator barrels?
I'm not.
No.
Okay.
But it sounds like a super cool name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they are stainless steel with a stainless steel pot, essentially, with just an oak head on them. You lay them sideways so the spirit is in contact with the oak head, and they have the same surface area to volume ratio as like a standard barrel.
Oh, interesting.
And so they're
smaller.
They have 1 gallon and they have 5 gallon barrels.
Oh.
And this has like been really huge in the home distiller community because you're now able to do a smaller scale batch and make enough to fill up a 1 gallon barrel and not have to worry about oak age or over oaking your spirit or anything like that. Have you guys had any spirits that are from distilleries that use like little barrels, like 5 gallon barrels and stuff? And what do you think of them?
The vast majority of ones that I've had have not been good. Like there's exceptions, but
yeah, definitely exceptions. I think that
I think Rulesan has did some good stuff with smaller barrels, which Andrew came from Kings County, which did stuff with smaller barrels. But
and there's been some barrel aged cocktails that are behind bars that sometimes are good out of those small barrels, but not just the rum itself. Usually.
Yeah. So Rulesan, they're really great. I'm a fan of Andrew. And like, I think rum can handle a lot of oak. I don't know. You just think about also when it's aged tropically, right? That also lends itself to more oak extraction. Granted, those barrels are typically used, so there's not all that fresh, like brand new oak. But yeah, I think that it's really, really hard to do and to do well. And so a lot of small craft distilleries are trying to go for like aging it fast and saving space. And we're only doing small batches. So they'll do the smaller barrels and then they end up over oaking their spirit, or it just, I don't know, kind of tastes like an oak tea.
Covers it up.
Right. Yeah. So the bad motivator barrels have been really beneficial to home distillers. And I think that they could also be really beneficial to small little craft distilleries that are looking to age their spirits. So I may have some baseline that is in a 5 gallon right now.
Look forward to trying that for sure.
But yes, would love to have an actual barrel program, in a full-blown one, not just like a barrel, a full-blown barrel program in the future. Yeah. That's a variable to play around with.
It is. And that's a good point.
Like, let's talk about all those shadow variables, like way more shadow variables than you can count. But yeah, it's a variable.
Age variables, yeast variables, there's all kinds of variables to look forward to now. I think people will be really excited about that. But before we wrap up, we do have a tradition on the show that is helmed by my co-host John Gulla, the rapid fire round of the show, which we know that you're a fan of puns from the name, Dunderclap, Tailspin. So this is the
Robyn
time.
and I go back, even though this is technically the first time we've talked. We go back.
Right. This is the time for puns. I haven't seen the questions, but sometimes there are pun-related questions. I wouldn't be surprised if one pops up. But John, any information you want to give before we dive into this?
Nope.
Assuming you're up for it, Robyn. I just assumed. We usually ask people if they're up for it.
Has anyone ever said no?
No, they haven't.
You would be the
Okay.
first person to say no.
Oh, well, I'm not going to say no.
All right.
I'm not going to be that person.
I'll do my best to keep the shadow variables in check here as we move through as many questions as we can in 60 seconds or so,
Or so.
thereabouts. Will is a generous timekeeper, so he's going to do that for us. But the idea is answer as many of these as quickly and as short answers as possible. And there are
Can I-
no wrong answers.
Can I pass if I can't answer fast enough?
No one's ever asked that.
Okay.
I think we would allow a pass.
You
But
get one pass.
We'll see.
One
We'll
pass.
see. One pass. Okay. Oh boy. All right. One pass. Let's see. I don't think I'll pass on anything.
So don't use it too early. Yeah.
I will.
Okay.
First question. Pass.
All right, are we ready?
Let's do it.
All right, I've got 60 seconds and go.
All right, Robyn, neat or on the rocks?
Neat.
This blog's
Column?
neat.
Yep. This blog's neat, of course. Column, pot, or blend?
Hot.
Pot. Knew that one. Aged or unaged?
Unaged.
Unaged. Cane juice or molasses?
Can I say syrup?
You can, actually.
Let's
Yes.
go syrup.
Syrup.
Yeah.
Okay. Rum et al. Stands for et alii, right? The feminine plural in Latin, meaning and others. What or who are the others here?
You guys are the others.
We're the others.
We are the
That's
others.
fun.
It's
Yeah.
everyone drinking the rum et al. That is the
Yeah.
others. I love that.
Yeah.
That is excellent. What an answer. Okay. How true is it that your PhD also stands for phenomenal distiller?
I'd say false.
Oh, come
Yeah,
on.
no,
You can say it's
no, no.
true.
Oh, I think you can.
Don't be so
I
modest.
think you can. No humble here. We're sure it does. Your favorite person to share an exquisite bottle of rum with?
Ooh, I would say Mary Dempsey. She is the distiller at Lost, or was the distiller at Lost Spirits, and her tasting notes are really, really fun. So we have a
Excellent.
good time when we share rums together.
And keeps the
Sounds
labels
good.
on straight, too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
Multi-talented.
At least early in the night, it does. All right. I did read into your background a little bit, and I know you're also a swimmer and diver. So, who is the greatest female swimmer of all time, and why is her name Katie Ledecky?
Oh gosh, I will say I was a fan of Jenny Thompson. I think was her last name growing up. So she was the one that I kind of looked up to when I was still a swimmer. So
Shout out to Jenny
Yeah.
Thompson.
Yes. And
not named Katie Ledecky, but I won't disagree with you there.
okay. And finally, Tailspin is the name of your latest variable release, which we went over. In my head canon, I have made up the origin story that this name clearly must have come from the legendary 90s Disney cartoon of the same name. So, what percentage of that release name actually was inspired by the show Tailspin?
0.
Ah,
I don't know that show.
0. Oh, well, it's a shame because if you said at least over 50%, I was going to sing you the original Tailspin theme song. But
Oh my
okay.
God.
Sorry. Can I
Now-
change my answer?
pass.
Pass.
We're at time, but John, if you want to just throw it in as a little
I mean-
bonus treat for the people out there.
I'll do it, but only if you all do it with me, okay? And
I
here's
don't
how it's
remember
gonna
the
work.
I
theme
don't
song
know
from
it.
Tailspin.
You don't have to. You don't have to. You just have to take direction, okay? And here's the
Okay.
deal. Here's what we're going to do, okay? I'm going to provide you with a point, and you're going to say tailspin when I
Alright.
point, okay? That's all you have to do, all right? So I'm going to do something, and then I'm going to point, and you're going to say
Tailspin.
tailspin. Thank you. Okay, and there's one other thing I need you to do, and that's Robyn. You got to get me started by saying spin it.
Spin it.
Bum 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 bum. Oh yeah.
Tailspin.
Tailspin.
Oh yeah.
Tailspin.
Tailspin.
Friends for life through thick and thin from another tailspin. Oh yeah.
Tailspin.
Oh yeah.
Tailspin.
all the trouble we get in on another tailspin. Spin it! There you go.
Wow.
All right. For all the people who do know the show, they're going to really enjoy that.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, I was a kid in the 90s, but I don't remember Tailspin. That I feel like I know the name. Okay.
You guys are just weird. Then.
I've seen these characters. Okay, wait. Was this on the Disney Channel?
Yes.
I didn't have the Disney Channel growing up.
Yes.
I didn't watch any of the Disney Channel shows.
All right. I'll look it up, but yeah, I think I was a Nickelodeon kid.
I was a Nickelodeon kid too.
Well, Nickelodeon. Okay, that's fair. Nickelodeon's good, but Tailspin, DuckTales, like those are things that we just don't get that kind of quality anymore.
Ooh, maybe I'll keep like Muck Tales in the back of my head. Yeah.
I like
so you can
it.
sing another song. Yeah.
There
you go. Just let me know when you're ready. I take payments through Zelle, whatever you need, and
Great.
I'll be right there for you.
Have your finance department get in touch with John.
Yeah, my finance department, my accounting department.
I'll have to check with my legal department to see if the copyright, is okay, but we'll get it done.
Okay. Well, that was an interesting finish. Robyn, before we let you go, is there anything we didn't touch on? Anything that you want the people to know, to look out for? You said you're going to be at the Rum Curious event.
Yes.
Also, how can people find your rum if they're interested in getting some of it?
So, I mean, as I mentioned, I think by the time that this will be released, it will no longer be available for sale online through dead of night. I am working on getting more widespread distribution for the bottles that I have remaining. Come to my website, rumatelier.com.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep people posted there where to actually pick up my stuff, but it'll be more so like in liquor stores.
What's the first This Blog's Neat video that people should watch who are listening to this podcast if they haven't watched one before?
Oh gosh. I don't know.
You have to roll it all the way back.
Right. Oh, don't roll it all the way back.
Start at
1. It depends on what people are interested in. If you're interested in learning more about my rums and how my rum is made, and also just like interested in, you're a home distiller, not saying that I advocate for home distilling.
We would never do that.
Never. But if you want to like take a stab at using my recipe, that is all over on my YouTube channel. Like, go for it. Ask me any questions. If you're, concerned at all, if you're just getting started, I can kind of guide you that way. But yeah, that's all over on, and I need to know what the titles of those videos are, and I don't know the titles off the tops of my head. So, but there's like my baseline rum recipe, I think is one you could start with.
Well, we will start. I mean, we've been talking about these rums for the last hour and a half or so. Mm-hmm. So we'll put some links up to, you have like really cool videos that go into how you made each of these. And then there's like a guided tasting of it and everything. So I think people would be interested in that. We'll definitely link to those. But thank you so much for hanging out with us this afternoon.
It's been great. Too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Rumcast. 132 episodes, Sean. Can you believe it? 132nd episode and another great one. It's still just as fun as it's always been, if not funner. If you want to learn more about what Robyn is doing with Rum et al., there are links in the show notes, not only to her website, which I do recommend checking out, because as we said, just the details you can get on these rums, it's pretty rare to find a producer that's making the type of information public that she's making. So that's really cool to see. We'll also throw some links in there to some of her videos that she's made about these specific rums that we discussed. Yeah. So I definitely recommend check out her YouTube channel, subscribe to it. There's all kinds of interesting stuff on there all the time. And I look forward to all her episodes. So we'd love to know your thoughts on these rums. If you have tried them, if you're going to go out of your way to try them, what should we have asked Robyn that we didn't ask her? Send us your emails, host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com. or you can find us on social media. John, where can they find us?
At the Rumcast, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, and we'll post our new releases up on any of those sites, and you can comment your heart away on any of those, or you can send us the email. Whatever you prefer, just get in touch with us. Let us know. If you had different thoughts, Will and I had very opposing thoughts on this chilled rum thing, and I'd be curious to know how many other people are out there that are either on Team Will or Team John in this case, or maybe your own team, and you find something completely new with it. And if this was something that was fun, you can let us know that too. Maybe there's an experiment number 2 in our future.
Yeah, we'd love to keep experimenting. I didn't even put it together. We brought on someone whose whole thing is experimentation, and we talked about our own experiment. So it went hand in hand. Good job, John, reminding us that we needed to revisit, the chilled rum experiment. All right, we look forward to hearing from all of you. Send us your emails, your comments, your DMs. We'll get back to you. It's always great to hear from people. But John, until next time, cheers.
Cheers.